Welcome back, students who are taking the Math for Business and Finance and Math applications. We're doing Chapter 17, the drill problems, and even though it's odd-numbered problems, just like the previous video, we're going to cover more than the odd-number problems due to creating schedules of depreciation, and the textbook has it so that each problem is just each year of that particular schedule. So we finished, we did straight line, and that took us through problem 8, and now we're going to be doing the declining balance method, and we'll start with number 9. And just as an FYI, yes, I have a sinus infection, so I don't sound the same as I did in previous videos. Okay, probably you'll like me better now than you did before. Okay, all right. So anyway, it says here, from the following facts, complete a depreciation schedule by using the balance declining method, and it's been decided to use twice the straight line rate. Okay, so what does that mean is we have to figure out what that percentage is going to be. All right, and if you recall, we're taking the useful life, which is 5 years, and since we want to know what it is, that percentage per year. So that's 1 year in the numerator and the estimated life in the denominator, so that's 5. Okay, and when we divide 1 by 5, that gives us 20%, and then we multiply it by twice the straight line rate, whatever factor we decide upon. So in this case, that's 2, because it's twice, which means we will multiply our book value by the factor by the 40%. Okay, if we had decided to use, say, 1.5 instead, okay, well, that would be, we're doing the same math, okay, except instead of multiplying by 2, we'd multiply by 1.5, and that means we'd use 30% in multiplying our book value. Okay, but for now we're using the twice, so that's 40%. Right. Also notice that our residual value, our salvage value, is 5,000. That's going to play a part towards the end of the schedule because we have to end with a residual value. And we're going to, even though we might be multiplying the book value by 40%, it doesn't necessarily mean we'll end up with an exact figure to hit our residual value of 5,000. We're going to end up with more, so we're going to take less depreciation than what we calculate in that last year. So you'll see that when we do the problem as we create the schedule here. So right now, the important thing is 40%. Okay. So let's go on to the schedule. Excuse me. And so I have end of year 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, even though it's 5 years in useful life, we go through 4 years, and you'll see why. Okay, so the cost of the truck was $25,000. So that's going to stay the same for each year. Remember, the cost less the accumulated depreciation at the end of the year gives us our book value at the end of the year. Okay, and notice that we have an accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year and a book value for the beginning of the year. Okay, 2 additional columns, and that has to do with the way we're calculating when we're doing the declining balance method. Okay, so in year 1, the accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year was 0 because it's the beginning of the year. Okay? And the book value at the beginning of the year is 25,000 because it's the beginning of the year. So now our depreciation expense for the year is our book value at the beginning of the year, right, times our percentage, which we had as 40%. Okay, so 25,000 times 40%. It gives us $10,000. So that's the depreciation expense for the year in year 1. So the accumulated depreciation at the end of the year, remember at the beginning of the year it started out at 0, so we're adding 0 and 10, gives us 10. right? And I'm not going to keep on drawing the lines to show the mathematical process because you had enough of that in the previous video. It's still all the same. So the previous year plus this year is how much accumulated depreciation is, okay? And of course our book value is the cost of the truck, right? Cost of the truck less the accumulated depreciation. So now it's 15,000. Okay, 25,000 less 10,000 is the 15,000. All right, so now we go to the second year. You know, our cost is still 25,000, but the accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year is no longer 0. It's the 10,000 from the previous year. Okay, and so it's this 10,000 now, you know, goes what was at the end of the previous year. I mean, think about it. December 31st of 2014 is the end of the year, so that becomes the beginning balance for January 1st, 2015. Okay, as an example, right? So all we're doing is just moving that figure. And of course, we're doing the same thing with the book value at the end of the year. Okay, we're taking this 15,000 and we're moving it to the beginning of the year, 15,000. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're going to be using that 15,000 in order to be able to calculate the depreciation. Why? We take the book value at the beginning of the year of 15,000 and we multiply it by our factor of 40, our percentage of 40%. Okay, and that means our depreciation for the year, for year number 2, is now 6,000. Okay, and then of course accumulated depreciation is 10 plus 6 is 16, and our book value is 25,000 minus the 16,000, or 9,000. Okay, it's just that simple. Now we're going to repeat that same exact process for year 3. We're going to carry the figures over. All right, so the end of the year accumulated depreciation was 16,000, so it becomes the beginning year, 16,000. And the book value at the end of the year was 9,000, so it becomes the beginning value of 9,000. To calculate our depreciation expense for the year, 9,000 times 40% is $3,600. That's 3,600. And we add 16,000 plus 3,600, so that gives us 19,600. And we take our 25,000, the cost, less our accumulated depreciation of 19,006, and that gives us $5,400 at the end of year 3. Okay, so now this is where things get a little bit different, wacky, because if you recall from the previous slide, let me bounce up, the residual value, I said we have to pay attention to that. The residual value is $5,000. Okay, so notice our book value is 5,400. That's an indication that I can only go down to 5,000, and that means I only, you know, if I have a book value of 5,400 and I have to end at 5,000, that means for this year I can only depreciate $400. Okay, so my depreciation expense is only $400 right here. Yes, I'm going to carry the numbers over, so this should be 19,600 and this should be 5,400. Okay, but I only, you saw how I arrived at the $400. That makes my accumulated depreciation 20,000, and of course 25 less 20 gives me $5,000 as my book value. Now, you know, pay attention to what I did there, and you already know this basically, because if I had taken the 5,400 right here and I multiply it by 40%, okay, times 40%, that means my depreciation, you know, I would have calculated it out to be $2,160. Okay, But because my residual value is only 5,000, I can't take the full 21.6. I mean, if I was going down to 0 as a residual value or salvage value of 0, well then yeah, I would still take 21.6, all right, finish this out, and then in year number 5, whatever remaining amount I would have. So let's just quickly do that math. So 5,400 plus 21.6. 4 from 3 is 2. I would only have $240. I'm sorry, 2,000. Let me just. Let me see. That's 3,200. No, that's not right. Well, let me do it out, right? Because let me do the math. Okay, so if we were saying, okay, first of all, back up just a second. So we see how this schedule is done. We're at our residual value of 5,000. But let's just say we had a residual value of 0, all right? So in year 4, our schedule would look like this: 25,000, 19,600, 5,400, okay? Then I would take the 5,400 times 40%, and I would end up with 21,600. So my accumulated depreciation would be 21,600. And then I would add 19,600 plus the 2160, which would have given me, get pen here, which would have given me 21,760 from 25,000, which would have given me a remaining amount of $3,240. So now when we go into year 5, let's see here, we would have 21,760. The book value is 3,240, okay? And we take the 3,240 and we multiply by 40%. Notice that, you know, I'm never, ever, ever going to get down to a 0 value, okay? If I want to only depreciate it for 5 years, you know, I can't get there. I mean, I'm going to have to, you know, keep on going and depreciating it more years, and I'm going to ever be, I'm going to always be getting closer to the, this is 1960, I'm 12.9. I'm going to be getting closer to 0, but I'll never, ever, ever hit 0. It's just because I'm always multiplying a number by 40%. I'm going to have a further increase, a further decreasing amount. So I'm going to hit a point where it's in either year 6 or year 7 where I'm just going to have to take and just, you know, add it on there in order to make it 0, all right? Because I'm going to get down to a point where I'm just doing fractions of a number, okay? So that's one of the problems with using the declining balance. I mean, it works great if you say, okay, this is my residual value, and we just want to, you know, when we get close to it, we want to take that additional amount in order to arrive at that residual value, okay? But when we go down to 0, we're going to get close to 0, and we're just going to have to, again, take that additional amount in order to get down to 0, because we're never going to ever hit 0, okay? So I hope you understood that. Let me just quickly go back and recap so that you a little bit of a better understanding, okay? When we're doing the schedule for declining balance here, yeah, we're taking our book value at the beginning of the year and multiplying it by our factor, right? In order to get our depreciation. And then, of course, we know what our accumulated depreciation is, which then gives us our book value. But because we're using this 40%, okay, we're going to be approaching whatever our book value is, and when we actually do the math, we end up going past it. But we can only take the difference between the book value and what we want. Okay, in this case is $400 instead of the 21 whatever it was, 2160 that we had before. So we fudge it in order to get to the book value, that we want, the residual value we want. If we had set the residual value to 0, instead you can see where I'm going with that, in that in year 4, if we multiply 5,400 times the 40%, we end up with 2160. Okay, and with the 2160, now our book value goes down to 3240. But if we notice what's happening here, every time I multiply that new book value by 40%, okay, 3240 times 40%, I get 1296 plus 21,760 gives me 23,056 minus 25,000 gives me 1944. Notice that my book value is continuously decreasing, but it'll never get to 0 because I'm multiplying by a percentage of 40. So at some point in time, however many years, I mean, I could drag this on to 10, 15 years. It's still going to get down. It's never going to get down to 0, right? So at some point in time, you have to say to yourself, okay, when do I stop depreciating? And I fudge it in order to arrive at 0. But that defeats the purpose, okay? I mean, you're trying to say that the useful life is right around 5 years, and here you're depreciating it all the way down, 10 or 15 years later, okay? Because you're never going to get to 0, right? So you set a residual value amount, and you work through however many years it takes to get to that residual value amount, even though your useful life. The only reason why you're using you're choosing a useful life is in order to be able to get the percentage, okay? And that's the governing factor for the declining balance. And also remember that the declining balance is being used in order to take the most amount of depreciation in your first years, okay? And so as you can see, from 10,000, there's a 4,000, you went from 25,000, you took a whole $10,000 jump, okay, in depreciation. Then the next year, like, that's 4,000 more, and that's 2,400. Okay, so it gets smaller. The depreciation amount gets smaller and smaller in later years because you're taking more of the depreciation in the beginning. All right, and that's the reason why you would use the declining balance method. To be honest with you, it's used, but it's not used, that frequently. All right, so with all of that said, we'll stop and pick up in the next video on the next problem.